Hello, folks. Welcome back to Fire Theft Radio, episode number 34. It's away from that 33. Nothing happened.
No,
We're still here.
We're still here.
Yeah, we
the world didn't end.
The world didn't end. You know, we were hoping for some kind of shenanigans on our 33rd episode, but it was just normal stuff. You know. Anyways, I'm here with my friend Omar, of course.
What's up, everybody? How you doing?
Yeah, and of course, if you see the title already, we have veteran guest Mike Davis. How you doing there, Mike?
I am doing fine. How are you guys doing?
Doing pretty freaking good. I'm not gonna lie. It was a good day. I liked the rain. It was crazy rain and thunder and lightning.
Yeah.
And that just reminds me of Thor, which is really cool. And I was driving, and I was kind of like, this is awesome. I was blasting some really cool music from the movie Tron and also from the movie Inception.
Yeah.
So I was trying to incept myself to do things later and be more productive, like do this podcast. So it's a good day. It's a good day.
All right. So you're pumped to do this.
Yes, definitely pumped.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. Yeah. So on today's episode, we brought back Mike Davis. He's like Chuck just said right now. He's a returning guest, 4-time veteran. If you've been listening to our podcast for a while now, you may recognize him from the emotional intelligence episodes. You've also recognized him from the episodes where we talk about biblical context, which was one of my favorite episodes, by far one of my favorite episodes. When we delve deep into a lot of the myth and the lore and a lot of the what goes on in the churches that has been pretty much myth and legend for the last 2,000 years or plus, which is not really biblically based. So we love that episode, and we wanted to bring him back actually because he just suggested it one time when we were talking off air about comic books. Because if you may not know, Mike D is a really big comic book fan, and
Yes,
I wasn't surprised about that. I was really surprised because every time I see him, he always has like a Batman shirt on. So and on Instagram, if you follow him on Facebook, you'll always notice that he has a Batman shirt on or a Batman hat on. And so we wanted to come on and, because we've already had a episode where we talk about archetypes, right, Chuck? Yeah. We talk about archetypes where we talk about...
Yeah, 3, I think almost.
3, yeah, we did a 3-part series on archetypes and symbols and how they're very important and how all these lead up to a meta archetype, which is God himself, and how everything points eventually to him. And so today we just wanted to bring you back on, Mike, to see if we can talk about how you got into comic books, why you love comic books so much, and we'll just see where the conversation takes us, man. Have fun.
Indeed.
All right.
I agree. What do you think, Mike? Does it sound like a good idea?
Oh, it sounds like a fantastic idea.
Well, I've seen you from time to time, definitely when there's a new movie coming out. You're there when, especially if it's comic book related. You constantly tell people on your Facebook crowd, "Hey, man, I'm gonna go to this Comic-Con thing," and you kind of give reviews of what you like and what you liked about said movie or your experience at Comic-Con, and I honestly didn't know that you liked that kind of stuff that much, And I consider myself I think I'm a novice when it comes to the comic book world, but I understand why people like them. And as I started reading them more, I was like, wow, this is actually really, really interesting how they tell stories and how things are set up, very visually and at the same time with the text. And I think that's what helps people really connect to the story more than just reading a book, because it gives you this visual perspective, especially if it's drawn really well. It's like, man, it really brings some emotion into what you're reading, But I mean, I guess let's start off from with a question.
Every hero has an origin story. So, Mike D, what is your origin story? Did you fall in a vat of toxic waste? Were you bitten by a radioactive bat? Or you went? I think this is where it started. You went to Upland Theological Library. You opened a book, and then inside of there was like this old bookworm, and it bit you, and then that's how you got the powers. How to discern, what is non-biblical truth to the real truth. Is that how it happened?
That's how it happened.
Right.
Who told you my origin story? That's supposed to be a secret.
I knew it.
Yeah, man. I've been reading comic books since I'm 53 now, and I've been reading comic books since I was a kid. I don't know how it started, but I mean, I was taught to read young by my mom. My mother taught me to read before I went to school, before I started school, and I just knew that from a very young age. And my family has stories about this. I love Batman. Batman has always been my favorite to this day. Like, I told you guys I'm wearing my Batman hat, my Batman shirt, got my Batman cup with my hot beverage in it.
Mm-hmm.
But he's always been my favorite. And I know when I was younger, when I was a little kid, I remember having this. My great grandmother bought me a Batman costume, which I wish I still had because it would be worth a lot of money today. But it was a mask that you actually put all the way over your head. There was a cape and everything. And my family tells stories of me leaping off of ironing boards. Yeah, there's stories of me leaping off of things, trying to be Batman. But I remember in the early 70s, really beginning to. That's my first awareness of reading comic books, and it was always the adventure that I loved about the comic books. And what I loved about, which I hope we can get into, is the heroes and what the heroes stood for. That there were certain things that they stood for. There were certain things that they upheld, values that they, especially back during the early 70s the 60s and the 70s, heroes stood for something. And I can tell you right now that for me, and I was a black kid growing up in South Bend, Indiana, comic books back then informed my thinking about a lot of things and informed the way I treated people. And if we bring it around biblically speaking, in Galatians chapter 3, the Apostle Paul talks about how the law was, some translations translated as a schoolmaster. The term is a pedagogy. And this was a person that the Torah was a pedagogy. And a pedagogy in the first century world was a person who would watch over the children of a household. They would take the children to school and from school. They would protect the children from those that would try to hurt them physically and morally. Okay? So Paul likens the law to this. And the pedagogy would watch over children until such time the children came of age. I've always said, for me, before I became a Christian, comic books were like my pedagogy. They kind of protected me. They gave me, and I know it may sound weird, but it gave me a sense of value of right and wrong, of standing up for those that were weaker than me, that might be picked upon. And I found myself doing that as a kid. That I would stand up for people who would be picked upon. I would rush to their aid, to their defense. And it was because of what I was reading in the comic books. It was because my heroes were Batman and Superman and Spider-Man, but especially Batman and Superman. Those were my heroes, and they always stood up for the weak. They stood up for the oppressed. They stood up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. They were honest. They were people of integrity. And they were loyal. So it was those things that for some reason as a kid, it really resonated with me. It spoke to me, and it provided for many years until I became a Christian, kind of a way, it set for me the values by which I lived my life.
Yeah, no, it's very true how these moral rules are universal, right? How when you're a kid, their instincts inside of you, it's like they're in your heart, and even though these things are, agnostic, just stories, but the moral foundation of being righteous, loyal, like you said, of wanting to do good and protect the weak is something, I think, especially in a man, brings out the best in you. Brings out the best in you as a man. And I'm not saying that women can't have these emotions, but these are that's why comic books attract more young men than women, because I think men esteem these and hold these values higher in regard than most females would. And by you being a young boy, I understand, because the same thing, I was very much a nerd just like you. and I still am.
Me too. I'm proud of it.
And still am. Yeah, still am. I don't read comic books as much as I used to do, but I used to read a lot of comic books when I was a kid. To me, my superhero that I identified with was Spider-Man. I was obsessed with Spider-Man since a young age. I mean, to me, first it was Wolverine, but then it was just Spider-Man all day long. I would spend hours and hours drawing Spider-Man, reading Spider-Man comic books, collecting, because I identified with his awkwardness, his inability to be his inability to talk to people in high school. He was just this weird kid. But when it came down to it, when he had to put on the suit and become Spider-Man, he was fearless. And I identified with that a lot because I was like this awkward, quiet kid. But when it came time to speak up, I would do it. I would become Spider-Man. And so, I get you. I get you in that way.
One of the things that what you said before is that we are able to identify with heroes. And I think that's one of the reasons comic books have in the past been so popular is because of the identification issue, that we could see something in ourselves, whether it's their alter ego, or the superhero that they actually are. And also I think it's the story aspect. As human beings, we are story beings. We tell stories. We explain our life in terms of story. Even the Bible itself, for the most part, the Bible is a story. And I don't mean an untrue story, but it's a narrative. The teachings of the Apostle Paul, and most theologians will tell you this, Paul's teachings occurs within a certain story, a certain narrative, which is the story and the narrative of Israel. So we're story beings. This is how we make sense of the world. And from earliest times, we've always had mythologies. We've had stories of gods and heroes. And it's a way of being able to explain the way life to explain life. This is why life is the way that it is. And I think somebody has there's a guy I listen to on YouTube called Professor Geek. He's actually, I believe he's an English literature professor, but he talks about comic books and he teaches comic books in his class. I thought, man, I wish I had this guy when I was in school. But he talks about that comic books are our modern mythology.
Yes. Yeah,
and I think that's really true. That they kind of inform. They shape our perception of the world. They shape the way, and they allow us to express our thoughts, our feelings. So going back to what you said, I think one of the reasons comic books have in the past been so popular is because it allows us to identify. We all feel that, like you said with Peter Parker, that awkwardness. Some of us felt like Clark Kent, but we wanted to really be Superman. One of the most popular comic books, most people don't know this, one of the most popular comic books during the early 1940s, the late 30s and early 40s, was Captain Marvel. And not the Captain Marvel that's getting ready to come out now, the female, but right. Shazam, that's what he's called now. At what point he was outselling Superman.
Really?
He was more popular than Superman. DC actually took them to court. DC now owns the character, but back then it was owned by a separate company. And but yeah, he was more popular than Superman. Well, you could see why, because Captain Marvel, his whole thing was he was a little boy who said this magic word and he became an adult with superpowers. So kids were flocking to this. It's like, whoa, okay, Superman is an adult and he was still popular, but Captain Marvel is actually a kid who becomes a superhero. Mm-hmm. And so he was out. So kids were identifying with that. One of the reasons they brought on Robin. The reason, Robin is basically considered like the first sidekick of superheroes, but it was to identify with kids. Mm-hmm. And so if, not only could you identify with being Batman, it's like, oh man, what would it be like to work with? I mean, Batman had a kid working with him, never mind the legalities of that. He's putting the child in danger, right. But wow, here's a kid who is a partner with Batman. So yeah, there is that identification issue in that factor that I think is why comic books, and comic book writers, consciously or unconsciously seek to speak to something within us.
Right.
And I agree with you that it brings out the best in us.
No, indeed. And me personally, I've always liked Superman. Mm-hmm. And I mean, since I was a kid, I've always liked Superman. And like you both said, it's one of those things I think where you just relate to the character in some way or another. Right. And it connects to you. And then as I started growing in my faith and studying the Bible and understanding that the Bible is also written in narrative form and that there's these characters in there. And, it started making so much more sense to me. And I started connecting to it more because I was becoming, I was relating to the character in that story of the Bible. Like, oh, wow, like this is crazy. And then, you start just there's these the way stories are told really just connects you and elevates the story even that much more, and it makes you really just feel like, wow, this is important, you know. And you know, recently they've been giving me a chance to teach more at the church that I'm currently going to, and that's been my greatest challenge, is to make, because I teach the teenage kind of crowd, and to make them understand that the Bible stories are still relevant, because I think especially in our school system today, and especially once you go to the universities and college and stuff like that, they start, you know, throwing around how that Bible is no longer relevant. It's just an outdated book, and there's no need for that anymore. And I'm just kind of like, wow, that person must not know anything about storytelling and just in it, the Bible in it of itself, and how it's composed as literature is very powerful. You know, I actually had a teacher in high school who was an atheist, and he promoted the fact that we needed to read the Bible if you wanted to read great literature, you know? And actually it's just interesting to hear from someone who's an atheist, you know? And he understood, like, this is really well written. Like, this is the way it's composed, and it's made to make people understand, to relate to these characters, and these characters that were, you know, broken down, fallen. This messianic figure came around and started restoring everything, and it's just like, wow. And so, you know, I think one of the biggest complaints I hear about the Old Testament is like how bloody it was, and how you know, it's filled with rape, it's filled with, you know, stonings and murders and all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that's the story of humanity, you know, like,
exactly,
you know. And so it's like, you know,
welcome to life.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And that's why it's in that effect more important, or more real, I should say, than just some fantastic story that was made up. It's like, no, that's our story, man. That is our story. And besides that, and even though that was a thing, like, God's still reaching out, and people should understand that, you know. And I think when you put yourself in that position and understand the story of who God really is, and you start really understanding your place too, and then it's just, everything starts making more sense. And me personally, like I said earlier, I really like Superman, right? So I started researching, like, who made Superman, the two guys who came up with Superman, and how they basically put in Superman a Mosaic and Christian or Christ-like figure into this one character, you know. And when I started understanding that his name, you know, Kal-El, is, you know, El, of the house of El, and it's just related to all those things of God, you know, and Jor-El, his father, and all of that. Like, the names have symbolism to, like, mean, like, a chosen one of God or vessel of God, and all these different things. I'm just like, oh wow, like, this especially when I became a Christian and I found that out, I was like, I like this guy even more, you know, like this. and you see how, for example, Superman, his moral code, I mean, is at the highest level of any other superhero. Like, it's just super high, and he really just images that person who morality is unbreakable to him. Like, I cannot shift from this. Morality is not subjective to him. It is objective, and he sticks to it no matter what, you know. And because of that, it makes him this just super archetypical superhero where you're like,
makes
wow.
him a god.
Makes him very godlike, but at the same time, he has the human element, so he's relatable, you know, and it's just like, oh, you know.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, again, why when I was growing up, superheroes were something you could look up to, and you could aspire to be. And going back to what was said earlier, Omar, when you talked about how they call out the best in us, that's one of the things I loved about superheroes, is that they challenged me. They challenged me to be better. They challenged me to a higher standard. I mean, literally, for me, in terms of how I read them, I had a best friend when I was in 5th and 6th grade. His name was, at the time, we called him Ronnie Sinkush, Ron Sinkush now, and we've reconnected over the years. But he and I, we became friends. We bonded. I was black, he was white. We bonded over comic books, you know, and he and I kind of tried to live by this code of, you know, standing up for people. And it was the thing that, you know, we endeavored to do. And I remember after he and I connected after years, we had not seen and talked to one another. I had moved to California, and I called him one day, got his number. And I said, yeah, you know, I'm in the ministry now, and I'm working with people. And we were talking about how when we were younger, you know, we were trying to live this code of like a superhero and be there for people. He said, man, you're still living that code, huh? I thought, well, yeah, I guess I am. In a different from a different framework now. But it's that thing that I loved about superheroes is that they did challenge me. I mean, everybody, and that's what I loved about Batman. That's what I loved about. One of the reasons I always loved Batman was because Batman was a human being. And as most people say, anybody could be Batman. Of course, if you have $1 billion, you got a large cave underneath your house. But the idea was that Batman was trained. He was an ordinary human being who trained himself to physical perfection, as the legend says. And so it's like, wow, anybody could do that. You could bring out the best of yourself through training. And Superman, again, even though he was from another planet, what I loved about Superman was not so much his powers. It was, as you guys said, he had this code that he lived by. What I loved about it was Superman had Midwestern values. I grew up in the Midwest. I'm from Indiana. Superman had these Midwestern values that were taught to him by his parents. And so, like you said, it grounded him, even though he was at that time considered the most powerful being on the planet. And in the older comic books, he was like the most powerful being in the universe. But Superman had this moral fiber about him. Back in this by the time you get to Superman around the 50s, 60s, early 70s, Superman absolutely would not kill.
Yeah.
I remember one comic book where there were these bees that were attacking Superman. They were being controlled by something, and he could have killed them. And I remember in the comic book, it was like, but he can't because of his cold. So he had to figure out another way to take these things out. And that always stayed with me, that he wouldn't even kill these insects. And so, like you said, Superman had this code that he just would not break. Batman was the same way. As the character developed, Batman took on a no-killing rule. And pretty much in the comic books till this day, Batman has abided by that. Now people will say, and it's true, in the early days, yes, Batman did kill people. And I have the comic books. In the early days, yes, there's a comic where Batman snaps this guy's neck. Right. He hangs the guy from a plane. I'm like, okay, but it was kind of the time in which the comic books were created. But as it went on, especially with the introduction of Robin, he developed this no-killing rule. And out of all of the superheroes within the comics today, the one that has basically remained true to that has been Batman. He has a no-killing rule. They had Superman kill somebody, and at one point, Wonder Woman has killed someone. Batman has always remained. He's been the one that they've kept true to that he will not kill. He will go to any lengths to, he'll even save his enemies, but he just will not kill. But again, in terms of the superheroes, that's what I've always liked about them. They had a certain standard. And even when Superman, when they had him kill somebody, if you read the comic, it was actually kind of justifiable in terms of he was acting as judge and jury, because there were these three supervillains. They had destroyed this entire galaxy. Everybody was dead. Superman was like, "Oh, you guys, no, you should be judged for this." Yeah. But then they showed the consequences of that. He had nightmares, and because he broke his rule, But the idea, though, even then, even though, and we could talk about this, comic books began to shift, values began to shift, and you started to see that enter into the comic book characters. But up until I'd say about the 80s, mid 80s, they stayed pretty true. Yeah. They were who they were. But there came a point, like during the 80s, with the introduction of the comic The Watchmen. I'm not sure if you guys have probably heard of the movie. I don't know if you read the comic.
I've read some of the comic. I've read a little bit of the graphic novel, the new one that came out with the movie, but I've never read the old comics for The Watchmen.
Yeah, when that came out, and if you guys want to talk about it, we can. Comic books begin to shift and change. I began to see this line appear in comic books. They're not, it's not your parents' comics. And that's when comics really began to shift. They really began to change and morph into something different.
Yeah. A little bit, going back a little bit to what you were saying on the values that Superman had. Because these are made up characters, right? These are characters that come out of somebody's imagination. I believe that we impart, right? We impart onto these fictional characters what we, the writer, hold dear. What we have inside of us, we input that into the character that we create. And so when you impart onto Superman these Midwestern values, that's just a reflection of the culture and of the time to which Superman was created. So, of course, if Superman is born in the Midwest, he's gonna be all American,
Yeah.
America. He's gonna be somebody who is, doesn't kill, somebody who holds truth to be the epitome of everything. He's gonna be loyal. So all these things go along with his character.
Mm-hmm.
And as time goes by, you can see how culture shifts, right?
Mm-hmm.
The not your parents' comic books, because why?
Mm-hmm.
Because all the baby boomers, right, who were the children of the crazy 60s, who were growing up in the 60s.
Right.
These baby boomers are growing up in the 60s, free love, make love, not war. And so they started growing up. They started becoming these people who were just, crazy, wild, do as you will, do as thou wilt. Then they started creating these comic books. And so then in the 80s, all these kids are starting to grow up in these single parent households more.
Yeah.
The divorce rate is starting to go up. You see violence, you see sex. All these things start becoming more popular in mainstream culture. MTV comes out. Rock and roll goes from, swerving your hips like Elvis to just, what is that? A guy or a girl standing singing rock and roll, Guns N' Roses type of deal. So culture shifts, and of course the morals and the standards to which that culture abides is going to go. And so as that shifts, so do the superheroes,
the value shift.
The value shift, the superhero shift. And that's really important. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. So if Superman were created today, if Superman was a millennial born in Los Angeles or in Chicago, who would he be?
He would need a safe space.
He would go to if you Man of Steel, the movie Man of Steel, I think is the answer to your question. This is me personally. I did not like that movie at all, because I was like, that is not Superman. I was like, and what's so funny is when that movie, I remember we were going to see, I forget which, there was another superhero movie we were at, and they previewed the trailer for Man of Steel. Mm-hmm. It was so bad. Usually when superhero movies the trailers are played in theater, people are like, wow, woo, cool, man, can't wait till that come out. It was dead silent when they did the Man of Steel trailer. No one clapped, no one said anything, and I went, oh, this is not good. I could already tell. I said, this is, and the way it was being played, I went, I'm not getting the feel of this movie, because the Superman movie that I still love, I think it's the best one made, was Superman the movie with Christopher Reeve. Christopher Reeve actually captured perfectly the character as how he was being written at the time. Man of Steel, I think, is when you said, if he was written today, I think that's what we get. We get a Superman who was not happy with being Superman. He was raised in the Midwest, but he really does not have Midwestern values. One of the things that I disliked so much in the film was the way they portrayed Paul Kent. There is a scene where Clark saves a bunch of kids. They're in the school bus. They're drowning. He pushes the school bus out and saves everybody. And his father chastises him for it. And he goes, what were you thinking, Clark? Because his father is afraid. He goes, should I have let them drown? And his father goes, maybe. I was in the theater. I was like, what?
That's true. I didn't even think about that. You're right. Yeah.
That was not the way Paul Kent was originally written. And the whole movie was, and then there was his mother going, you don't owe people anything, and you be who you want to be. I'm going, this is not the Kents. This is not the...
Because they were hippies. They weren't born in the 1920s during the recession.
And so this is when you said, what would he be like today? Man of Steel, in my opinion, is, and I know there are people who, that movie, when it first came out, it was like, oh, this is the greatest movie. And I'm like, no, it's not. And then when the hype fell down, people saw that people were greatly divided over this movie. There were those who liked it, some who loved it, many who just simply disliked it. I've disliked. I can tell you when I don't like a movie, if it's a superhero movie, it's when I go, it's on television. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to see it. Same way with Batman v Superman. I saw that movie once, and I have to say, I hated that movie.
Me too.
Hated
I didn't
Batman
like
v
that one.
Superman.
Yeah, I didn't like that one.
But the problem was, and I hope I don't lose you guys viewers over this, but it was the way the characters are portrayed. But in going back to Man of Steel, like there's a scene where there's a tornado, and Superman, the dog is in danger, and Pa Kent goes back to get the dog, which is crazy to me. It's like, okay, you're a mere human being. Why would you go out there and get the dog? Let Clark go get the dog.
Mhm.
But when there's a scene when the tornado was coming, it's getting ready to kill his father. And Clark is getting ready to rush out there and save him. His father looks at him and kind of holds back like, no, Clark. It's like, you got to keep your secret. Don't come rescue me. I'm going like, are you kidding me? And so he lets his father die. And I'm going like, are you kidding me? Now, this is versus the Christopher Reeves movie where Pa Kent, he's talking to Clark, and he admonishes Clark because Clark is upset that he can't go out for the football team because his dad is like, hey, it wouldn't be fair for you to go out for the football team. He said, but I can do all these things. He says, Clark, your gifts are meant for something greater. And he talks to him, and you see the fatherly bond. He's encouraging him. He's encouraging him to use his gifts for humanity. And then he dies. Right after that conversation, you feel it. And there is a scene where Clark says, and this is actually reminiscent of the comic books, all these powers, and I couldn't save him. That was so different from, it's like, here comes a tornado. I could save him, but, Dad says no because he wants me to keep my powers a secret, and I'm not sure I should really use my powers in the first place. So, yeah, my mother's standing right here, by the way, and we can save him, but I'm going to let him die. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. Where the Christopher Reeves movie, it was something natural, is like, I couldn't save him. I have all these powers. So it brought a humanity to Superman, but at the same time, you hear the last words of his father's was encouraging him to use his gifts for something more important than just simply wanting to kick a football. And so there were just some great values. Like, he's frustrated that he can't at this point be who he really is, but his father's like, be patient. It's going to come. It wasn't like the Man of Steel movie. It's like, we're not even sure you should use your powers. You should keep it hidden. There was such a great difference like you said before, in terms of the values. Mm-hmm. The Superman, the movie that came out in 78, 79, they were still going by that model of Superman of the Midwestern values.
Right.
And that movie, it was a big hit. When we were in the theaters, we were cheering. When Superman caught Lois Lane when she fell from the building, and then he caught.
I remember that. Yeah.
Man, you should have saw. I was like 13 or 14. You should have saw everybody in the theater. We're all cheering. We're like, yeah, all right. Man of Steel, I didn't hear that happen one time. Mm-hmm. There was no cheering. There was kind of like, is Superman gonna save anybody in this movie?
No, he's gonna destroy whole cities. What he's gonna do?
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. Me personally, I didn't mind the movie. I actually liked the movie, but
you don't read comic books, so
yeah, right. You go put me. I know. So you don't know what's up. You don't know what's up. So the reason I like the movie, Man of Steel, is I had my problems with it, but I get what you're saying with the family. But there's at one point where he actually, basically, even though they gave him all this bad advice, he basically didn't follow it and still became Superman. Yeah. And still did his thing, and I was okay. I was like, oh, okay, cool. He still did, what they advised him not to do, and I was like, okay, I like that. But then what kind of killed it for me is, in the end, he ends up killing Zod,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yo, you can't kill Zod like that. Like that's not what Superman did. Like you don't kill Zod.
Yeah.
And I had a problem with, because he just decided like, I'm going to kill these people, I'm going to kill Zod. And I don't know, man. I just feel like Superman would have definitely done something else and saved the family that was about to get killed by Zod. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that was just a scene to me that kind of almost ruined the movie for me, where I was like, no, like it
did for a lot of people.
Yeah.
That one scene, and for me too.
Yeah.
Because when it happened, I was kind of like, what? I'm like, there were plot holes in the movie.
Yeah.
For instance, Clark is just now discovering his powers. He's using his powers. He's fighting General Zod, who is a trained military man.
Well, he was bred for it, literally bred for it. Genetically engineered to be a warrior.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I'm kind of like, okay, there's a problem with that. But yeah, because I read a lot of reviews after I saw the movie and before I I read some reviews after, and I was composing my thoughts for it. Because a lot of my friends on Facebook, when I go see a superhero movie, they're like, "Okay, Mike, we're waiting for your review," And so I wrote about it, and that was a big problem that a lot of people who know the Superman mythos, they understand the mythology around Superman. It's like Superman doesn't kill, and there are people who go, "Oh, well, Superman has killed before," but the main idea of the character is he doesn't kill, and that's the idea of superheroes. Superheroes don't kill. And they find another way, which is one of the reasons we like them. It's like they find a better way than the way we normal humans would do, which is supposed to inspire us to find better ways. And so when he went that route, a lot of people just did not like that.
Yeah, unless you're the Punisher, then that's all.
Yeah,
you
but
do is
that's
you just punish.
He's an anti-hero.
Yeah,
He's an anti-hero.
Yeah,
I'm not a big fan of anti-heroes.
Yeah, you just punish everybody. Yeah, and you know what? Getting a little bit into that, that's very, very popular within the last couple of years. The anti-hero.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what?
Well, that's what the Watchmen.
Yeah, going into it's not your dad, it's not your parents' comic books. Within the last couple of years, it's very popular to be okay. You know what? Yeah, you don't kill. You hold truth to be above all. But you know what? That causes kind of problems, because then you're treading this moral line that most people, quote unquote, can't follow. So I think people are relating more now to the anti-hero. That's why they're becoming more popular, because the anti-hero has no rules. He has no code. He just goes out there. His only code is to win. That's his ultimate goal, is to win, and he's gonna win by whatever means necessary. That's why Deadpool is so popular. The Punisher movies are so popular. That's why you see heroes like in Breaking Bad. Walter White.
Let's take it a step further. There's a huge following for people like Thanos. You know what I mean? Where they're like, and those kind of characters where they're like, you know what, we do need to eradicate everybody. You know what I mean?
Thanos did nothing wrong, Chuck. Okay, he just wanted balance in the universe, bro. He wanted everything to be perfectly balanced.
Omar, give the mic back to Chuck.
Okay, here you go. But you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there is that thing of turning. I think part of it, and I think this goes back to departing from our values. This is one of the reasons I love Captain America. Because, and this is in the comic books as well as in the movie. If you remember in Captain America Civil War, there is a scene where they're at, have you guys seen, it's Avengers Civil War. Sorry, Avengers Civil War. Great movie, love the movie. There is a scene when he's at Peggy's funeral, his old girlfriend. And he quotes a line from Peggy, Peggy's niece, quotes a line that her aunt taught her. However, that's actually a line that she quotes that's from the Captain America comic book that Captain America actually quotes. And I don't remember the whole thing. I should have memorized it, but it's basically this. It's the idea of you stand up for what's right, even if no one else does. And if they tell you to move, you plant yourself and you go, no, you move. And Captain America, in my opinion, embodies that. He will stand up for what's right, even if no one else does. I think one of the reasons some people have gone to anti-heroes, there's a verse of scripture in the Bible that says, don't be weary in well-doing. Don't become weary in well-doing, for in due season we'll reap if we faint not. I think sometimes, and this is just my perspective on it, people get tired of doing what's right, and they feel like doing what's right gets us nowhere. So let's go the anti-hero way. It doesn't work. People start to believe, the old value stuff, that's outdated. But when you see, like in Civil War, Captain America, there's that tension between him and Iron Man, and Captain America is like standing up for, freedom. There's arguments on both sides, and I think the movie does a great job of presenting both sides of the argument. The comic book, if you read the comic book Civil War, Tony Stark is just a total creep. I mean, he is like, Tony, you're a creep, But here if you read the comic book, for me, I was like a total team Captain America. In the movie, I was like, wow, they did a really good argument. I could see Tony Stark's point of view. I'm still team Cap, but they really articulated Tony's side well. But it's that thing of, I'm going to stand for what's right. I'm going to do what's right, even if the world around me says it's not right, which to me is very biblical, that you stand for what is right. And I think it calls to us as believers to be lights in the world, even when the darkness, it seems like it's getting darker, and we have in our own day, values are shifting. Even within the church, people are going, well, things that we said we stood against, we said, this is not right. Maybe we should change our view. And then there are those that are saying, listen, we can't just simply change things because it makes us uncomfortable or we feel like the world around us is shifting. So you have to take a stand and go, I'm going to be a light, even if the world around me is growing darker. But guess what? That's what light's for. And so you see superheroes like Captain America, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. What superheroes would always do, especially in the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, and up into the 70s, they would always stand for what was right, even if the world around them said, but that's wrong now. We don't agree with that. They would go, no, we're going to stand for we're going to stand for truth. We're going to stand for justice. We're going to stand for certain values. I think, just to say this real quick, like when you guys, during the 60s in this country, people begin to look at this world or our country and say, hey, America is not living up to its values. America is not living up to its promises. And so people got disenfranchised with the country. They got discouraged. I haven't. And the reason why, because I said, America is more than just its politicians, its leaders. America represents certain values. And even if the people don't hold the values, or our leaders, that is, even if the leaders don't hold up the values still stand. And so our heroes are those who say, I am going to hold to the values, even if no one else does. So you have a Martin Luther King Jr. who decides, I am going to seek for civil rights equality for Black people, for all people, but without the use of violence. I refuse to go down the road of violence. And he stands for that. And that is what he is one of the things he's remembering. That is why he is considered a hero. He stands for that value even when no one else does. When I mean no one else, when others around him, there was that big debate and kind of controversy between him and Malcolm X. Malcolm X's view was by any means necessary, but even Malcolm X, if you read his story, he begins to change. He begins to undergo a change in his thinking about who to work with and how we do it. So it's those people who say, I'm going to stand for these values. And that's what I think comic book heroes, what they have done. The anti-heroes are usually the ones who get tired, like the Punisher. It's like, there's no justice. So I'm just going to mete out my own brand of justice. Deadpool. I've never been a Deadpool fan. So people say, have you gone to see the movie? Like, no, I'm not. What part of it too is all the profanity. I'm like, I'm not into all the profanity and stuff. And I said to somebody one time who asked me about it, because they said, you didn't do a review on Deadpool. I said, I didn't go see the movie. I said, Deadpool to me is not a hero. He's an anti-hero, and there's a difference. But even like within The Watchmen, The Watchmen, I originally did not like that comic book when it first came out. I hated it. I went, no, this is not heroes. But I went back, I kept being drawn back to the story. And now I could say, I believe truly it is a classic. It's a well-written story. It shows the flaws of these heroes. And even within the story, there is a hero, one of the most unlikely heroes, who stands by what is right, even though no one else does. And he has to sacrifice his life to do it. And that's Rorschach. He ends up, he's like, you know what? This is wrong. I don't care what, because one of the main heroes kind of does a Thanos. He figures that this is the way it needs to be done. But Rorschach still stands, even though he's crazy, he's nuts. But he has that element of there are certain things that are right and wrong, and I will not abandon them. And I think that's the thing about heroes, and even today, that we need that. One of the things I keep saying, that it seems to me that in our day and hour, one of the things that we are lacking in this country among our leaders is moral courage. We're lacking moral courage. Where people are, because they're afraid of losing their position, their power, their prestige. They're afraid. And so people will not stand up and say, this is what I stand for, even if no one else does. Even if the majority says, this is not right, I don't agree with you, I will stand and go, I'm not going to move.
Yeah, definitely. I think that moral courage is is very important, and I think that's going back to the beginning. That's exactly why we venerate these superheroes to a certain extent. We see them, and I mean the ultimate superhero, being Jesus, how he ultimately believed in the truth. He believed in the truth so much that he was willing to die for it and for us, and so he gave his own life. And all these other mythical superheroes that are created by the minds of men, that's how when you see them give themselves for the ones they love, you see that and you're like, wow, and it moves you. It pushes you towards something in you, and it makes you want to aspire to that, and so just like those, like you mentioned, Malcolm and Martin, they knew they had a line, they weren't going to move, and they ultimately paid the price. They paid the price for that, for pushing culture into direction of equality. And it's I think most of us aren't willing to pay the price. We say we are, but when it gets tough, we back down. And there's been many times in my life where I've wished I could have been a Malcolm or Jesus, and stood by and held the line, but ultimately because of shame weakened, and it's true, culture the way it is today is pushing against that very hard. The people around us, because of social media, because of the way the darkness is encroaching in, people like us who are Christian find it can be more exhausting, it makes you want to be an anti-hero. Exactly. It's exhausting to like always tell the truth, because you see the guy at work who doesn't tell the truth and who's lazy gets ahead, and you're like, come on, man. What's going on?
What's the use?
What's the use in telling the truth and doing a good job and being righteous as much as I can if the Deadpool guy is out there doing it? But I guess in the end of the day, it's self-worth and not putting your head down in shame and putting your head on the pillow at the end of the day, and being consciously clean, consciously clean, that I'm doing what it takes in order to push it forward. And on Sunday, the church I go to, the pastor was talking about abortion. The whole service was about abortion, and it was like, whoa. It's like, I don't know, to me it was like, whoa, this guy's talking about this incredibly divisive subject in today's age, which it shouldn't be. It's a topic like any other that you should speak about because the Bible speaks about it. But I was thinking to myself, if people were sitting in here, like, they would riot, they would burn this place down right now. There are people within our country that would gladly burn this place down and take him out, and hang him because of what he is saying, because of what the Bible is saying, and these lines. And I was amazed at him in that moment. He was, he was Superman right there, standing on that with the Bible, saying, this is what the Bible says, and this is what we must do. And I was amazed. I was like, whoa.
Well, I think that goes back again to, we're looking at this biblically, theologically, and in comic books. This is what I love about my life. I can look at things scientifically, psychologically, theologically, and with comic books.
It's all connected.
Yeah. And so, in comic books, what you see is, it goes back to what you're saying, heroes will serve and protect not only the good, but even the evil. Batman will save the Joker.
Ooh.
Superman will save Lex Luthor. In the movie Batman Begins, the one thing that I did not like in that movie, which I thought it was okay, it's not my favorite, is at the end when Christian Bale's Batman is talking to Ra's al Ghul, and he says, I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you. And he flies out of and he lets him die. And I looked at that, I went, that's not Batman. Batman would have saved him. Batman would not have said, I don't have to save you. Yes, Batman would, because Batman's thing is not just I don't take life, it's also preserving life, even of his enemies. Now, how does that translate over biblically? Jesus tells us, love your enemies. Jesus died for those who are hostile against him. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. These are qualities of a hero. From ancient times, these are the real qualities of a hero. And so one of the things...
Something just popped in my head. I just realized, I guess I didn't put it this way. The same people who basically killed Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not only did he forgive them, but he returned them with, by the way, I'll give you eternal life. So
Yes.
It's like, it was like the complete opposite. Like,
exactly.
You know what I mean? Instead of like letting them die, he was like, no, actually, I just provided the way so that you don't have to die. You know what
exactly.
I mean?
Exactly. And that's the thing that and I can really connect this biblically. Jesus gives us that example, and he saves the Bible even says that while we were his enemies, God sent his son to die for us.
Yeah.
So while we were hostile towards God, he still saves us, which is what we see in the comic books heroes have done. And so even today, like you were saying before, it's like, well, what's the use of doing what's right? What's the use of living righteously when we see that it really doesn't do you any good? But that's the thing of heroes. They do it because it's right, and they understand by continually doing what's right, we're upholding the order of things. Because if we all give up, the world falls into chaos. And so we keep doing what's right, even if it means that and here's the thing, we're fighting for those who are fighting against us.
Yeah.
Because if the heroes just give up, everything just falls into chaos. Everybody dies. This is why I say Batman will even save the Joker. Superman will save Lex Luthor. Christ came and saves all of humanity, even those who put him on the cross. And so we're told, that's why we're told you wrestle not against flesh and blood. That's not your real enemy. And yet those that we are to stand for and to pray for and to reach out to, they are at first hostile to us. But we have to have that courage. We have to possess those qualities to say, I will lay down my life for you. That is what heroes does. Now, what's interesting, and I think one of the things that we need today, going back to what you were saying before, Omar, I think what we do need today is examples. We need heroes. Because one of the things that in ancient times, the mythologies, I used to read mythology as a kid along with comic books. I read Greek mythology. I read Norse mythology. I read Roman mythology. And I love the stories of Thor in Norse mythology. I tell you, the stories of Norse mythology are just as good or better than what we read in the comic books. Those stories are fascinating. But they all taught a lesson, and they were often used to serve as examples for young men, sometimes young women, but they served as an example for moral character and quality. That's the way they were used. We see this actually in the Bible. Hebrews chapter 11, which we often refer to as the Faith Hall of Fame. That chapter, which it says, it talks about by faith Moses, by faith Abraham. It extols the virtue of faith. It is calling those who are hearing this and reading this to faith, but it uses examples. It's known in scholarship as an examples list. The purpose of an examples list is to highlight characters who exhibit the quality that you want your hearers, your listeners, your readers to exhibit. So it lists all of these people. It's to encourage them. It's to give them examples biblically of faithfulness to God. And who does it end with? It ends with Jesus, where it says in chapter 12, Jesus is the author and the finisher of faith. One of the ways that could read is, he is the paragon. He is the model example of faithfulness to God. So look away from all that distracts unto Jesus. We need examples that will encourage us. We need examples that we can emulate. And I think in one sense, comic books at one time served that, because like you said before, based upon the time when they first came out, we were often in a time of war. There were certain values that people held to. Those values were embodied in the comic book characters. Loyalty to your country, loyalty to your friends, virtue. You stand up for the weak. All of those virtues were embodied, and there was a hope and there was an optimism to superheroes. People could be, even to the point where I remember many times in superhero comics, you'd have this guy who was the bad guy fighting the superhero, and the superhero would be like, I believe in you. You can do better. And the superhero would stop fighting, and this guy has a gun, and the guy would turn, and because of the belief of the superhero, And I always think, and as a kid, that always impressed me. Wow, if you believe in people, it could help change them. Now, it's not always true. However, it was that optimism that if you see the best in people and you give them a chance, that could change things. So I think in order to move away from some of the cynicism, some of the despair that sometimes we fall into, we have to have models. We have to have examples of people who don't give up, who don't quit. I've come to realize in my own life, partly I've learned this from superheroes and the mythology of it. And again, I want to emphasize there are modern mythology. And just like in the ancient world, they used to have stories of heroes, Achilles, Hercules. They served as models. The biblical world also has its heroes, Abraham, Moses, Joshua. Those are our heroes. That's why they're used in Hebrews chapter 11. You've got to have those examples. Paul himself said to certain of his disciples, follow me, imitate me. Those things that you've seen in me, that you've heard in me, emulate, do. And I've heard people say today, oh, I would never tell anybody to follow me. I look at that and I go, that's a shame, because we need heroes, meaning we need people who embody the truth. We need people who will say, I will walk in the light. And yes, does it take sacrifice? Yes. Might you lose everything? Yeah. I've told my girls over and over again, sometimes standing for what is right will cost you. You cannot avoid that. And my wife and I have experienced that. There are times we stood up for what we believe, for what was right. We stood against leadership because the leadership was doing wrong, and we have lost things. We have lost money. We were kicked out of a fellowship because of standing up for what we believe. And it was actually wrong things going on. It came out later, but we lost. We were excommunicated. My wife says we were banished, and we were. We business contracts. I would not work with certain people because of how they were treating other people. And did it impact us financially? Yes. But I also know I had friends of mine who came back and told me, not in necessarily these words, but it was in essence, they said, you inspired me. You helped me because you took a stand, even though it cost you. And so we need heroes today in the Christian community, outside of the Christian community. We need people who will inspire. We need Martin Luther King Jr.'s. We need, as he was progressing in life later, Malcolm X's. We need people who will, and the thing about heroes, sometimes we look upon our heroes, we go, well, they seem bigger than life. Well, yeah, because they're the model and the example. But what every hero should do is to say, like Paul, what you see in me, I want you to do. Now, a hero doesn't go around going, I'm the hero. He just goes and does heroic stuff. He just lives the life. He lives the value. He embodies the values. Batman doesn't go out and go, hey, I'm the Dark Knight protector of Gotham. He just goes out and protects Gotham, but people realize Batman is a hero. Even though Batman and Superman are different, Superman is considered the superhero's hero. All the superheroes look up to Superman. He's a hero's hero. But every superhero highly respects Batman because it's like, you want something done? You got to figure out a plan. Nobody goes to Superman first. They go to Batman. As
the meme would say, with prep time, the two most dangerous people on the planet is Batman and Kevin McAllister.
So my point is that we need, I think what comic books teach us. Now, I have to admit, comic books has changed over the years. I don't read them as much as I used to. I don't buy them, I should say. I stay abreast of what's happening in the comic book world. I got things I listen to on YouTube. There's a comic book shop in my area that I go to, and I talk with the guys there. We talk about comic book, and I'm considered like an old guy. So there's me and this other guy. We're both in our 50s, and so we remember stuff from way back. He and I grew up watching the Super Friends, right? And so and the 1960s Marvel comic stuff. We talk about this, and people are like, what? I got to tell you guys a funny story if you don't mind.
No, of course.
Go ahead.
Remember the original Avengers movie when it first came out?
Yeah.
Okay, at the end of that movie, we're all sitting there, and you see this guy sitting on the throne. He's been on there the entire time, right? But we never saw his face. Mm-hmm. And he turns around to the camera at the end of the movie, and I go, oh my gosh, it's Thanos. And I just said it out loud. Yeah. Every people in front of me and back of me, and I'm like the oldest guy there. They go, who's Thanos? And so we go outside. We're outside. These young people, no one had any idea who Thanos was. We go outside. I have a large crowd of people around me as I'm explaining who Thanos was, and my wife is like, "Oh my gosh!"
Like,
she's like, "You're in your element."
Like, please, children, sit. I shall tell you the tale of Thanos.
Sit. Let me tell you the tale of Thanos, the mad god, the mad titan.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
That was, I believe, that was Mike D's what's it called, Olivet Discord. Right there.
I can imagine that. I would have been sitting there too. I'm like, so when we getting this fish or what? I'm hungry. I'm hungry.
You're so hungry. Can you multiply some popcorn?
Yeah, man, I'm hungry. When is this gonna be over? Even the guy in the background is like, "Hey, Chug, when is this gonna be over, man? I got some fishing to do."
So one thing I want to bring up that I think is important, because we're talking about, being, the stories are relatable, the moral code that they uphold, and how it connects to the Bible and Jesus himself upholding a moral code that no one could. As we read these stories, they become more and more connected to biblical stories.
Yeah.
Because of these archetypes, these symbols,
right?
And which is why I believe in even an atheist who is honest and knows about literature will say, like, well, actually, that is a very relevant story. If you even, and I've told this to people, and I make sure I explain myself correctly, because I don't want them to think, especially when I teach at the church. I tell them, if you read the Bible like as a mythological story, you will get so much out of it. Even if, let's just say, God didn't exist, but just as literature, it would just substantially help you if you put it into effect, because the morals are pragmatic. There's something that can change your life. Like, as soon as you start practicing that moral code, your life will actually change in that moment, aside from a divine power behind it,
Right.
And so, that being said, the most important thing that I think you mentioned earlier is that they hold a moral code. And even though, if, like you said, some of these politicians might not follow the values are still there. So again, it goes back to morality being objective, and when it becomes subjective, when you can just change it and decide, what morality looks like, that's a dangerous slope, because then you decide what new values are. And I think that's one of the reasons, me personally, I could never now get into comic books today. And it's one of the reasons I don't like a lot of movies today, because I see what morality looks like now. It's been redefined, and those new ideas are perpetuated in these movies, in these comic books, and it's just I'm like, dude, this is something else. This is not even what it looks like. Did you notice the same thing when you started seeing all these things?
I started coming back to actually buying comic books probably early to mid 2000s. I remember the first time I hadn't bought comic books in years. I walked in, I was like, when did comic books become $3.99? When did this happen? I was like, the last time I bought a comic book, it was 60 cents. So I was shocked. That was number one. But I began seeing it actually before that, in the mid 90s. There was a comic book with Green Arrow and Black Canary who've been a couple for years. And in the comic book, on the first page, it depicted them in showing, well, basically in a sexual position. And I was like, what? What is going on? And that's when I began to see it was shifting. That's when they started saying, this is not your parents' comics anymore. I think Watchmen helped to introduce that, because now it became, we got to make our comics dark. Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, which I think is also a classic work. But all of a sudden, from that point on, Batman changed, and superheroes became a little bit darker, more grittier. Then there came this thing called the New 52, which I have to say I loathe. DC Comics did this. I loathed their New 52 comic line. Didn't like it at all. And I said, this is going to fail. And it's not that I wanted a company to fail. I never want a company to fail. But I knew that line. And here's the reason why. What I saw was happening is what you were speaking to, Chuck. I saw that they were departing away from values. They were departing away from what is known as legacy characters. They were getting rid of all of the old characters. There's a group called the Justice Society of America. They totally wiped them out. We had all these wonderful, great characters. And all of a sudden, these superheroes had these different values now. And I thought, this is not going to fly, because superheroes represent, in my opinion, and I think of the opinion of many, they represent certain values. Superman represents certain things. Batman all of a sudden, he just became this vengeful, angry, mad, and they even started making Batman suicidal. I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
Batman at one point was about justice. He was about making sure that justice was done and that the bad guy got caught, and it started to become something else. And when that happened, I at one point I decided I'm not going to buy comic books anymore, and I stopped buying them. I don't. If you were to look at the comic books that I actually have, I buy a lot of old stuff. I buy they reprint stuff from the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. That's the stuff I buy that I absolutely love.
Yeah.
There's only a few titles today that I would actually spend money on. There's like a because what happened was, Sweeney's back around, a couple of years ago, DC Comics, they were losing money. The New 52 was not selling. They decided to launch a new series called DC Rebirth. And they were bringing back, and they were saying, okay, this is what the leaders at the top of DC were saying. We hear you. We've lost something along the way with our comic book heroes. They were saying this. We've lost something of the heroic. And it was all the stuff I had been saying, other people have been saying, we're going to bring it back. And they started bringing it back. They brought back Superman. They got rid of Superman's red trunks, the trunks that, people always talk about. Yeah. Superman wears his underwear on the outside. No, that's not underwear, it's trunks. And there's a whole reason why it's there. But they brought that back, and they were restoring the characters. And people loved it. They're like, oh my gosh, my Superman is back. My Batman is coming back. They have recently flipped. And they're going back. They have gone back the other way now. And DC Comics sales have gone down again.
Yeah.
People like values.
Yeah, they do. I think it's I also think it's the political climate we're in, the cultural climate we're in, that affects a lot of what the writers are, because writers are artists. And speaking as an artist, we're very much moved by our emotions and by what culture says. And most artists really aren't, I'm not going to say critical thinkers, but they think more with their hearts. And so they're very much moved by what culture says. And so this affects a lot of the comic books. And I mean, I don't read a lot of comics like I used to, but I still enjoy knowing what's going on in the comic book world. And there's this guy that I follow on YouTube. He actually used to draw Batman for DC, and he would also draw the Green Lantern. His name is Ethan Van Sciver. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Yeah, Ethan Van Sciver. His name
sounds familiar.
Yeah, Ethan Van Sciver. He has a YouTube channel called Comic Pro Secrets.
I've seen it.
Yeah, Comic Pro Secrets.
I've seen it.
And that guy's phenomenal. No, he's a phenomenal artist. But he was fired from DC because he's a conservative. He's a conservative politically, and he was fired, and he was dragged through the mud on social media. People were calling him Nazi. People were calling him, white supremacist, a bigot, a homophobe. All these classic, liberal terms, ultra liberal terms that people like to place on. They placed it on him all because he wasn't liking. He himself would say, "I don't like where the comic book industry is going. They're pandering to all these people who don't even read comic books, because comic book sales are low, all-time low. They might be the movies might be doing well, and certain movies do better than others, but when it comes to comic book sales, they're all an all-time low. He was saying that you'll be lucky if a comic book will sell 100,000 copies. He says that's a lot for a comic book to sell. And so he said that the reason, and it alludes to what you're saying, is that they're low because the artists and the writers are pandering to the culture. That's why you have female Thor. That's why you have all these She-Hulk. All these female.
We had a black Captain America, and I'm black.
Yeah.
And I don't think Captain America should be black. I think Captain America should be Steve Rogers. And yeah, go ahead.
And so yeah, we'll get into it a little bit more. Let me just finish this thought. He's somebody who's in the industry, right? Mm-hmm. He's somebody who's in the industry, and so it was really sad. His story is kind of like he's like a superhero himself, because remember how we were talking about how even though the world around you is changing, if you hold on to the lines, that's what a real hero does. And this guy, he stood on that line, man. He stood on that line. It cost him his job. It cost him his everything, friendships. He said he knew people from the industry for years because he's been drawing comic books for almost 30 years. And so it cost him his job. It cost him the industry, relationships, everything. Mm-hmm. This guy, he lost it all. He started doing comic book videos on YouTube and just started, ranting about Star Wars, about this, about that. And then he started a Indiegogo campaign to create his own comic book.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're familiar with this story. And so he started his own. And man, this guy he's like over hundreds and thousands, almost $1 million to make his own comic book. Yeah. And it's a comic book character that he created, that he invented, and he says that it's a throwback to the comic books the way they're supposed to be. No anti-hero, none of that. It's just a hero. And to me, it's just like, wow, this guy is what a hero is in his own personal life. And so I think that all these all these things that are happening right now within culture influences a lot on what comic books are not supposed to be,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a problem, and you're like the problem has been from my perspective, because it's like you mentioned about the female Thor, and there are people who love the female Thor. I wasn't particularly impressed because of the way they did it, and I'm an entrepreneur, and as entrepreneurs know, we know about taking risk. There's always a risk. And so at first I looked at it and said, well, they're taking a risk. They're trying something different. But then I looked at what they were doing. I was thinking they were pushing an agenda rather than writing good stories. And people begin to see through that, and they go like, you know what? You're pushing an agenda. You're not. And what the fans were angry with was that you've abandoned good stories to push an agenda. And as I've read so many times from so many fans of comic books, they said, I do not want to be preached at. I don't want to come to comic books to be preached at. I don't want, and people would say, look, because people would go, well, this is the stuff that's happening in the real world. The reason I come to comic books is to escape the real world for a period of time. Yeah. I don't want that in my comic book world, though comic books do write about real world issues. They've always done that, but they've been able to do it in such a way that the story was the main thing. That maybe there were subplots that were behind it, but it wasn't front and center, and it wasn't pushing something. It wasn't saying you've got to believe this and you've got to accept this point of view. It was balanced. It's like when I mentioned before about Captain America, and they made the Falcon Captain America. The problem was, as everybody saw, you're pandering. It's like, oh, Captain America can be black. Most people that I read who were upset with they said, as I said, when I was growing up as a kid, I didn't care what the color of the hero was. He was a hero. It was the qualities the heroes embody. I love Black Panther. And somebody said, how would you like it if they took Black Panther and made him some white guy from California? People be like, oh, no, you can't do that. Well, why not?
The Surfer Panther.
The Surfer Panther.
What's up, dudes? The Surfer Panther.
Dude, Wakanda forever, man. But the thing about it is that tell a good story. Yeah. And tell both sides of the story. Yeah. Don't just tell one side. And let there be a real tension. Let there be a real argument that doesn't have to be resolved.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why Kathleen Kennedy's Star Wars failed.
Don't go there, man.
Don't get me started.
Open up a can of worms with that new Star Wars, man. You know this. This is like that wound that never heals. Dude, sepsis.
You gotta pray for me, Mike. I still haven't forgiven Kathleen Kennedy. I'm still got a grudge against her. You know what?
Dude, you gotta pray for me because
let's just all bow our heads right now and pray for each other. Let's all pray for each other. Lord help us.
You know what? When I first started watching the new Star Wars stuff, I turned to a friend of mine that I went to the movies with, and I went, this doesn't feel like George Lucas. And he goes, George Lucas didn't do this. I went, oh, okay, that explains it. I said, what is this? Because I've never been a huge Star Wars fan, but I've seen every movie because it's Star Wars.
Yeah.
And when I was excited about the reboot. I did like Rogue. Was it Rogue One?
Yeah.
I like that.
It's the only decent one. Yeah.
Yeah. But The Force Awakens, and then at the end where Luke. I hope I hope your listeners have seen Star Wars. Yeah, spoiler alert. But if you don't want to hear the next one, just turn off.
Just don't watch it. Period.
Don't watch it. You ain't
missing nothing. You ain't missing nothing.
But where Luke just kind of the books burn, the Jedi books, and Yoda appears, and I'm like, what? And they're like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm like, but see, it's like trashing tradition. Tradition is no longer important. And it's like, no, if you get rid of your tradition, then you have no foundation. Ooh. It's not that you can't build on it, but if you get rid of it, you have no foundation. The thing about Judaism, which is what Christianity is based upon, Judaism is rooted in their traditions. They're rooted in their past. And you have to look to your past to know about where you're going in the future. It gives you a rock solid foundation. And so things like you guys said with Star Wars, I have not been happy at all. I'm like, oh my gosh, what are they doing?
If you didn't know, they canceled all the rest of the Star Wars.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah, so hooray.
So I say let's pretend it never happened.
Yeah.
Go get Mark Hamill and say we're doing this over.
Yeah. No, I think you said something really important the other day that you told me about Star Wars about towards the end how he wasn't really there, Luke. Can you explain that in his shadow of former self or something like that?
Oh yeah, no, how they how in order to make way for the future, you always have to destroy the past, and how you have to humiliate the heroes. It's kind of like this whole
right.
It's how in popular culture people use Jesus Christ as a cuss word, so people bang their foot and you say, oh, Jesus Christ. Why? Because in order, and this is something that people who want to destroy the past do in order, the image, you have to tarnish the image. So that's why a lot of this revisionist history is very popular nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they say, well, did you know George Washington had slaves? And you're like, okay, but what does that have to do with him trying to make America,
Right.
So like they go and they have to dig these things up. They have to go into the past and tarnish the image of the heroes,
right.
That's why they have to make these heroes like Batman, somebody who's bitter and weak. Why? Because it tarnishes the overall image of who he is. So it's no longer a hero. It's somebody who's just this weak, bittered old man. And so the same thing they did with Luke. It was very obvious when you see in the Return of when was it? Episode 8, The Last Jedi, episode 8. See, I don't even remember the names of the movies. That's how much I hate them. Episode 8, how, it starts off. I mean, it's very obvious how they start off, and she hands him the lightsaber. Rey hands him the lightsaber, and he just tosses it to the back, as in, this doesn't matter. And then they go on, and they continue destroying his image. They humiliate him. You see him, suckle the teat of that weird walrus creature, and you're just like, who is this? What is this? This is not the guy who was standing on Tatooine looking at the two sunsets, imagining himself as a fighter pilot, bringing order into the galaxy. That's not the same guy. That's not the same guy who didn't believe that he was the son of a murderer. That's not the same guy who was willing to fight his father for truth and justice, and to forgive him, to not go into the dark side.
And saw the good in his father.
Yeah, who saw the good in him and was willing.
He put good.
Who was willing to see the goodness that he was still Anakin and that he was his father and he was his son. But then you have him drinking this green milk and saying it's over, it's all done, it's not worth it. And then in the end, at the very end, he wasn't even able to physically be there. He had to be a shadow of himself. He had to be an illusion. Because that's the whole point of it, is that he was just an illusion of himself, that he couldn't even be there physically.
Yeah.
And he gave himself up for nothing, literally nothing. It was, to me, it was sad. It was heartbreaking to see somebody who was the epitome of a hero be dragged through the mud and say, this is who your hero is.
Right.
That was sad.
They have been deconstructing heroes, especially male heroes. They've really
It's
been
that attack on
deconstructing them.
masculinity, man.
Yeah, and there's a show out now. I don't know if you guys have seen it, Supergirl, and it's on the CW.
I stopped watching that probably about halfway through the season. I was like, oh Lord.
Yeah, I when it first came on, I was a champion of the show. I thought, okay, this is cool for girls. My daughters were young at the time. You were younger, and I thought they'll like this, and it was kind of campy and hokey, but I thought, hey, it had some good morals. But as it went on, it became less about good morals and values and strong. It became about this thing of pushing women are stronger and better than men. And the more I'm like, what is going on? And at one point in the movie, in the series, they kept saying over and over, they started this thing, Supergirl is stronger than Superman. They even had Superman on the show and him saying to Supergirl, you're stronger than me. I was fighting at full power. They got into a fight with each other. He goes, and you defeated me. No, you're stronger than me. You're better than me. And I'm going, yeah. I'm going, now here's the thing. People go like, oh, but it's about equality. It was not about equality. It was putting Superman down and the other men in the show down to lift the other women up. And I'm thinking that's unnecessary. Supergirl, it's like Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman, everybody knows Wonder Woman is a strong character. She can hold her own. One of the things I did like, I did not get, at least I don't think I got from the Wonder Woman movie, was that men are weak, men can't do anything, and Wonder Woman is stronger than everybody. I didn't get that. She fought with these guys. They were equal partners in what they were doing. And I don't think it's necessary to put down men or women in order to show that one is equal, that one is, you can show, even if we take it from a biblical perspective, when the Bible says about God, God says to Adam, or says about Adam, it's not good for man to be alone. I will make a help that's meet for him, a helpmeet. It doesn't say helpmate, it's help meet. And the word help in Hebrew is a Hebrew word ezer, which when it is used, it's also used of God. It speaks of one who has the strength to help, who has power. The word meet is the idea of this person corresponds to you. They complement you. So God was, as one scholar translated, God was saying, let me make for man a power, a strength that is equal to him and complements him in every way. Mm-hmm. So it was an equality. It wasn't one is stronger.
That's real equality.
That's real equality. Mm-hmm. This is what we need to see, not this putting down. And it's happening in the comic books. There is concern now that in the movies, Marvel might start going in that direction. I hope they don't, because they've done pretty good. Not in their movies, they've not done that. In their comic books, they have. Mm-hmm. And people, Marvel has lost sales. Marvel sales has gone down. DC has, in their comic books, have pretty much stayed away from it. But now they're looking at it and they're going like, are they starting to do that? Because they've hired certain people in. So there's a concern now. So let me go bring this down to something that you guys said. I think one of the problems is writers, creators, they are not listening to the fans. The fans are upset and they're going, listen, we don't like this. Some of the writers, some of the creators have even gone and called fans idiots, called them names on Twitter. I'm like, whoa, these are your consumers. These are your customers. You can't insult your customers. Any good businessman would tell you, don't insult your customers. Mm-hmm. Listen to the feedback. I understand that, people are creative. My wife is a creative. But it's like there are times when we've talked about like a client, because my wife is, you guys have met my wife, she's very creative in what she does. And there are times when she would be working on something and she said, I'm behind on this. And I would go, is that what the client asked for? She goes, well, no, I can make it better. I go, quality is not determined by the vendor. Quality is determined by the consumer, the client. This is what I used to teach total quality management. This is one thing we taught. We as the vendor, we don't decide what quality is. The client does. So in the same way, we are the client, we are the consumers of this material. And if you may love something, but if your fan base goes, we don't like it, if you want to stay in business, you got to find that happy medium of how do I fulfill my creative desire, and at the same time, because part of what I'm doing, I'm creating this for people to read, for people to enjoy. So I've got to be able to find a happy medium and a balance there.
Yeah, I think they're just captured by their ideology. They're ideologues, and most of these writers and and artists are ideologues. They're captured by the current culture, because that's what they do. It reminds me a lot. You know what it reminds me a lot? A lot of what was going on in the 80s and the 90s with the satanic panic, and with all the people who would go to Congress and say, "Oh, you can't let your kids listen to all the Christian moms would say, you can't let your kids listen to Eminem because it's gonna destroy and warp their minds," which is true, but they were possessed by the spirit of ideology. You know, they were possessed by the spirit of wanting to do well, but imposing their belief system upon others. And I used to be this way. I used to be an ideologue back when I was in the cult. I used to be like, "How dare you say that? How dare you do that? Look at me. I'm morally superior to you." And so, because of that, you have to do what I say. You have to do what I do, because I'm virtuous. It's pretty much virtue signaling. Trust me, it's better for you. You don't know, and so you go around, and I think a lot of Christians are victim to this, unfortunately, of this "I'm better than you" mentality. They might not think it, but I see it a lot within. They say impose. We want to impose because we know it's good. We know that Jesus saves and Jesus loves you, but we want to impose these ideas onto the atheist, onto the agnostic, and no matter. It doesn't matter how much you're going to resist it. It's good for you. So we want to impose this on you. And I think, and I believe that these people who are writing the comic books, who are making these movies, people like Kathleen Kennedy, they are ideologues. They have a belief system and they want to impose it. That's why when people say, "I don't want to read comic books because I don't want to see this movie because I feel like I'm being preached at." Well, because you are.
Yeah, no, you
are
are
being preached to. You're saying the way you think is bad. Think this way, and so it just the state that we're living in right now, the culture that we're experiencing right now, it reminds me a lot about what the Christians were doing, the hyper Christians were doing in the 80s and 90s, trying to impose their ideas onto others. Except it's turned around, and now it's these ultra liberal people who are trying to impose their worldview onto us, and all the people who are centrist or a little bit more conservative are saying, "Hey, back off, man. Just let us do our thing."
Right. I agree with you. I think it's what we have not learned, what we've gotten away from in this country, is learning to listen to other people and not be afraid to listen to other people and their point of views.
Yeah, definitely.
Dr. Jonathan Haidt, he's written a book called The Coddling of the American Mind, and I think he would probably classify himself over in the liberal category, but it's a wonderful book. And one of the things he talks about is the dangers of being that you can't listen to the ideas of other people, and that we like you were saying before, we think we're right, another person is wrong, and therefore we think we're good and the other person is bad. Yeah. And that's the way we just have these black and white categories like that. And not to say that there's not goodness and badness or good and evil in the world, but we stop listening. And this is what the problem I have with a lot of writing in comic books today, is that both sides are not presented. To me, I think the best example that I've seen thus far was in Avengers Civil War, where you have these two ideologies in tension. You had Captain America who said, "Hey, we should be free to do what we need to do." You had Tony who said, "No, there needs to be some oversight over what we're doing." And it did not come off where one was right, one was wrong. I literally sat back and I thought, wow, they really gave a good argument for both sides here. Because again, if you read the Civil War comic book, Tony Stark comes off as kind of a bad guy. He's like, "Hey, Tony," and Cap is like the hero. He's standing for freedom. But in the movie, I thought they gave a great balance. And I heard what people say, like, "Yeah, man, I was on the side of Iron Man. You just can't be running around, with these superpowered dudes doing whatever you want. You got to have some oversight." And then people are going, "No, I was with Cap, man. You don't want the government having too much control." But I think this is the thing that comics can do. Yeah. Stimulate conversation. But if you present just one side, you get a lopsided view.
Yeah, definitely. I'm on the Captain side though, because
me too.
Tony Stark, he's part of the globalist agenda. Oh, yeah. He's the deep state. Tony Stark is the deep state with all that money. You don't think he's been giving lobbyist groups down in Washington, D.C.? Of course he has. He's been lobbying. That's all he does.
I got to tell you something real quick. There's a new comic book animated series out called Young Justice. Actually, it's not new. It's been out before. They just restarted again. And there's a scene where they show the Justice League. Long story short, The Justice League can't operate. It's kind of like Civil War. The Justice League is not able to operate like they used to. They're giving more government restriction. So Batman quits the team. And he takes a bunch of heroes with him because Batman's like, Batman's Batman. I'm not going to be operating under all these restrictions. Yeah. I got to do what I need to do. So he leaves. And I was reading the comment section, and somebody said, "Well, what would some of you have done? Would you went with Batman, or would you stay with the Justice League?" And some people say, "I'd have went with Batman." Some people said, "No, I'd have stayed with the Justice League." I wrote, "I would have stayed with the Justice League, working undercover for Batman."
Nice.
Yeah.
Little double agent.
Yeah, double O Mike D. Yeah, that's cool, Mike. Well, I mean, I think we can take this conversation for more time. Is there anything else that you wanted to? Do you want to cut it here, or do you want to keep going, man? I can keep going. It's up to you. You got time, Mike?
Hey, I got some time.
You got some time because we don't want to take up too much of your time, you know. So
my manager hasn't called me yet, so you guys are good.
Okay. All right, cool. So hey, what has been your favorite superhero movie so far? Like, what do you think? Because we've been talking about, I think people somewhat have an idea right now of why we enjoy and why people enjoy comic books so much because of the ideas and what makes a true hero. So what do you think recently, or even back in time, like what superhero movie has gotten it right, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I would say it would be a tie between the two, but it would edge out just a little bit, and that's the first Avengers movie. I think that movie just hit it on all cylinders. It was a great movie. It was fun. It was a giant spectacle. It was the first time you saw all the Avengers together. It was inspiring. That's what I look for in a superhero movie. Do I walk away feeling inspired? Do I walk away feeling like, yeah, I want to be a superhero? Do I get that feeling I got as a kid when I would read a comic book?
Yeah.
If I walk out and I don't get that, to me it's like, this movie wasn't that great, and I'm probably not going to ever see it again. Yeah. The Avengers, I literally went to go see that twice. Wow. And I rarely go see a movie twice. I mean, I paid twice to go see it. and I when it's on TV, if I have time, I sit down and I watch it. I love the Avengers. I think the very first one was great. Superman the movie is still a favorite of mine with Christopher Reeves. I think that was another movie that for the time, the special effects were fantastic. The tagline on that movie was, "You will believe a man can fly." And back during the late 70s when it first came out, you was like, oh my God, the flying scenes were just phenomenal. Back then. And I think Christopher Reeves really captured Superman. He embodied Superman. To this day, when people think Superman, they think Christopher Reeve, because he just really captured the character. So those are two of my absolute favorites, as the Avengers and Superman the movie.
Yeah, no,
you notice I didn't say any of the Batman movies.
Yeah, you didn't like The Dark Knight?
I did not. You know what? I did not care for Christian Bale's interpretation of the character. And Zack Snyder, was he the one that did it?
No,
who's the director for that?
Christopher Nolan did all this.
Yeah. I like Batman. I thought Batman Begins was okay. I thought all the movies were okay.
Yeah.
They just didn't really grab me. I thought they were okay, but they didn't really grab me. Batman Begins I'll probably watch. What I liked about The Dark Knight was the one with Heath Ledger.
Yeah.
He knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
As Joker. He is the best Joker, other than the guy. I don't know if you guys watch Gotham, which is a series that's on. It's about basically Bruce Wayne becoming Batman, how all the villains become who they are. There's a guy on there who basically is the Joker. I can't remember the name of the actor. I know his last name is Monahan. I think it's Cameron Monahan. This dude plays the Joker in my opinion, forget Jared Leto as Joker, and even who is it? The other guy who's going to be playing the Joker now, the actor. Can't remember his name right now.
Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, forget
Joaquin
them.
Phoenix,
Bring in Cameron Monaghan. This dude, there is a scene where they introduce his character. He's killed some people. He's sitting at the police station. His head is down. At first, he's crying. He killed his mother and some other people. And he's crying. And all of a sudden, he starts laughing. And he raises his head, and he has this grin. The internet world went crazy. They're like, this dude is the Joker.
Wow.
And it was without makeup. And he absolutely, totally nailed it. So, I forget why went into that, but Heath Ledger. Oh, I know it. Heath Ledger. I thought he nailed it as the Joker, and I think Cameron Monaghan is in my opinion, the successor to him. It'll be. I saw. Was it Jared? Is it Leto or Leto?
Leto.
I didn't like his Joker.
Yeah, I didn't even see the movie.
Yeah, Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
Which was.
Yeah, I didn't like it either. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like he played me more like he was a thug, you know, and I mean, just he was a thug, and it was like and he had a grill and everything. I was like, that's not the Joker though.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Captain America. I mean, the Avengers, the very first Avengers movie, one of my favorites. Is one of the movies I will watch over and over again. Superman the movie is one that I will watch over and over again.
Yeah. No, those are definitely.
And Batman, the 1966 movie. I will watch that over and over again.
Oh, the one with
Adam West.
Oh, with Adam West? Yeah. I've seen some clips on YouTube. And
that's one of my favorites.
I was just like, wow, I can't believe this was a thing. Like the type of
Batmania, baby.
Yeah, it's like Batman was groovy, like listening to the Beach Boys surfing. I watched an episode because they have it on. I think they had it on Hulu or on Netflix, one of those. And I started watching a couple of episodes, and man, they're wild. They're just you see Batman. He has like a bat spray because him and Robin are catching the penguin, and they're at the beach, and there's a bunch of surfer people at the beach, and they're like playing surfer music, like the Beach Boys, and then everything is the bat plane, the bat spray, the bat box, like the bat shoe. Everything has to have a bat.
The bat shark repellent.
Yeah, the bat shark repellent. Everything has to have. I'm like, what was going on with people in the 60s? Like people were wild, man, in the 60s.
Yeah, that show that is actually one of my favorite shows. That I grew up watching that.
Okay.
And it's campy, it's funny, but I love that show.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, I could see why people would like it because it's like you said, it's very campy. It's very, I mean, it's just a big goof. The whole show is just a goof, man, and I can see people just watching that and just dying of laughter. I wasn't laughing that much. To me, it was just like, man, this is weird.
Yeah,
but some parts were too ridiculous.
As a kid, I took it so serious. I'm like, this is Batman, and it's like as I got older, I didn't watch it for a while. And I came back, I was thinking, wow, I took this show so seriously as a kid. I'm like, no, this is Batman, And my family would laugh at me because, man, I was parked in front. You couldn't move me with a steam shovel. When Batman came on, I was there.
That was it. Yeah, no, for real. Oh man, well, this has been a great conversation, Mike. Definitely has been really, really awesome. Something that I can check off my bucket list now. Talk to Mike D about comic books, and we got to get back together and definitely talk about this. This is a conversation that we can continue having, and because the reason we wanted to have this because I knew that there was an intersection between superheroes, archetypes, and the Bible, because there always is. The Bible is such a Christianity is such this. It's this thread that just interweaves through culture, period. No matter what goes on in culture, it always has, like you said, you can talk about, like you talk about through the science, through the theology, through everything, and comic books. It all connects. It's all this big, wonderful thing. And to me, like the biggest thing for sure is that I, to all the people listening to us out there is, we should try to be heroes to our family. We should try to be heroes to the people around us, so they can look up to us, so we have
a meta archetype to look up to.
Yeah, definitely, and is Jesus. So that's our superhero, and hopefully our family members can see us, see him through us. I think that's the goal, right? I think that's the goal, man. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of like the characters in these comic books. They look up to this character, and then they start living by holding themselves to a higher standard because they believe in that character, and we should be doing the same. As far as our belief and our faith in God and imaging God. We believe in this character, and then he made himself absolutely relatable to us, becoming a man, being human. Yeah. So there's that whole archetype there, and because we believe in that, we hold ourselves to a higher standard, and it's just all these archetypes, and And I know there's a lot of like, especially more conspiratorial people listening to the show, and like, well, what about all the occult stuff and comic books and what about, and I get that stuff is there, and I get it, because especially I was going to talk about Watchmen, but we'll talk about this some other time. The writer Alan Moore, I mean, he's into some really shady stuff, and the stuff that he promotes in his personal belief is occult stuff, and I know that stuff is there, but we were trying to point out that the archetypes and these symbols, they're good. They're perverting it maybe to promote some other ideology, but the general story, the big archetype, is something that is always rings true, and that's why I think the Bible will always ring true, because there are these archetypes. You just cannot do away with them. You can't do away with them.
Yeah, we're supposed to be the light of the world, and I think part of that is, as believers, embodying in how we live how God wants things to be. And in the book of Romans, Paul talks about how human beings, we take creation, which is an expression of God's nature, his character, his attributes. We see the invisible things about God in the things that he has made. But the Bible says that humanity, because of our fallenness, we see the glory of the sun and the moon, and we take God's creation, which is supposed to reflect him, and then we twist it and corrupt it, and we make them into gods. Mm-hmm. We make the sun, the moon, and even human beings, we begin to worship them, right? But that doesn't mean that as believers, we can't appreciate creation. What we should do is go in and say, hey, God never meant for this to be worship. This is what he meant for us to do with it. Yeah. So I think one of the things as the lights of the world, things with art, literature, I don't believe in believers pulling from the world and saying, we're not going to have anything to do with that. No, let's go and be a light and say, and not by pointing our finger at people and go, you're doing this wrong, this is how it should be, but by how we live, what we do with it, showing how we can create beauty and how we can create art and literature, and say, this is how God intended creation, of which literature is a part. This is how it should be used. So utilizing the themes, because the themes are all, like you guys said, the themes are universal. Mm-hmm. It's what we do with them. It's like even because even things with magic and stuff, that all has to do with power. Mm-hmm. And the Bible tells us power belongs to God. Mm-hmm. And so how are we as Christians? J.R. Tolkien, who's, I have to admit, I haven't read a lot of his stuff yet. I'm going to be doing that. But he writes about magic. I remember I had some friends of mine who thought he wasn't a Christian because they were like, oh, he has magic in his and so does C.S. Lewis. But again, it's pointing to certain themes, and they are trying to bring something out. So living with a wife who is very creative, and of course me reading comic books, we've always tried to teach our kids, read this stuff, read it critically, read it with an understanding of your own faith. But don't pull away from stuff just because it might contain something that you disagree with. Now, of course, growing up, we would look at it and say they're not ready for this yet. Mm-hmm. We wait till they later. But we try to teach them to think critically. It's one of the reasons I also appreciate a guest you've had on, and that's oh man, his name just escapes me. But he's a writer, and
Brian Godawa.
Yeah, Brian Godawa. One of the reasons I appreciate him and his writings, and he writes about this, So I think that's something as believers, we need to understand all of creation belongs to God. It's originally his. As human beings, we tend to twist it and make it into something it's not supposed to be. But part of our calling as believers is to untwist it and say, hey, this is how God intended for us to enjoy this. So that's my thought.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you hit it the nail right on the head with a big old bat hammer. That it's something that I think it's something that we've been exploring and been untwisting the more we go through this podcast, right, Chuck? It's like because coming from the type of circles me and Chuck and myself roam around in, is like this conspiratorial where this is Illuminati over here, Illuminati exposed, Illuminati over here, and this everything exposed, occult, and Chuck and myself were like, at one moment in time, we found ourselves like that. Well, everything is wrong. The deep state, the Illuminati, the Bilderberg, everything is around us. But then Chuck and myself, we have this conversation off air where it's like, yes, but you know what? They're using what God has created, which is good, and they're perverting it. So why are we to be subjective to what they are twisting. No, we are to take what is good and perpetuate the goodness, and what they're twisting for the good into bad, we untwist it, and we're saying no,
Right.
you know,
Right.
because that's what we got to do. We're the light, we're the salt.
Right.
Let's do
Exactly.
this. You know, we're the
Exactly.
heroes.
Exactly.
They're not the heroes. We are.
I was getting ready to say this, it goes back in. We've got to be the heroes. The examples. One of my favorite movies, which sometimes surprises people, and some people it doesn't, is The Matrix. You know, I just, for obvious reasons, I love The Matrix. But one of the things that toward the end of the movie, when Neo, at the end of the movie, he's talking on the phone to the Matrix, and he says, they don't follow this through in the rest of the movies, and I was so looking forward to it, but they didn't do it. He says, I'm going to show them a world without you. I'm going to show them a world where anything is possible. And I thought the next series of movies was going to be Neo showing people that you can do what I do in the Matrix, and it never happened.
Yeah.
But the point that I wanted to bring out was that Neo was saying, I'm going to show them a world without you, a world where anything is possible. Basically, I thought he was saying, I'm going to gather around disciples and they're going to become more like me. They didn't do that, but that's what Jesus does.
Yeah.
Jesus, he gathers us to himself and says, I'm going to show you to walk like me. And so that, as he says, you are the light of the world. I'm the light of the world. Guess what? You're the light of the world too. And my light shines in you and through you. And so once again, it's like, yeah, we are to be those examples. We're to be those heroes. And we should be inspiring to the world. You know, now, of course, they may not always take it that way. I mean, let's be honest. I heard people say sometimes, you know, if we were more like Jesus, everybody would just flock to the church and everybody would love us. I was like, that wasn't true about Jesus. Everybody didn't love Jesus. You know, we forget they killed him.
They killed him. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. I love it when modern day, you know, fluffy, you know, Christianity kind of, you know, they promote these ideas of how Jesus was, and if we just did that, just like you said, I'm like, have you read the Bible?
You know what happens? You know what happens at the end of the Gospels, right?
Right.
He always dies.
But there were those during his time who came to him, who flocked to him. He didn't compromise his standards, his beliefs, but there was something that drew people to him. And I believe that as believers following him, there is to be something of that. There are going to be those who don't like us. Jesus said they hated me, which we seem to forget Jesus said. They hated me, so they'll hate you too. But then there will be those who love. There will be those who said, man, you've shown me something. I've seen something. You know, you show me that there's a better way by not just you preaching at me, but by how you live.
Yeah, it's like what Jarrell said to his son. You will be a God among them. They will hate you.
Yes.
It's the same thing that he said to them. They will
fall.
stumble, they will fall, but you will show them the way. You will be a God among them. And pretty much we are. You know, we are these lesser G gods living on. One day we'll be. You know, we'll reign on this earth with Jesus. You know,
we're the image of God in the earth.
That's what we are.
That's what we're supposed to be.
That's what we are. We're His image. Yeah, this is awesome. This is a great episode. By far, I think this is one of my favorite episodes.
Indeed.
Yeah,
And Mike, awesome. You're gonna have a good time reading the J.R. Tolkien stuff, man, because they have he writes. I mean, especially the stuff that, you know, on this show, and you yourself also study the unseen realm stuff, and you know, the fallen small G gods of the Bible. You know, those what those were and all that stuff. He knew all that stuff. Like, Tolkien knew all that stuff, and he wrote it into the mythology of Lord of the Rings, you know. And there's so much of it. I mean, he has his version of Nephilim stories, the creation story, because there's a creation story there, and you know, as he was creating, these eternal beings were like singing with him, creating this thing called Earth. And it's like, dude, that's Job, when, you know, it's where all the angels were praising God for him, you know, creating the foundations of the earth and everything. And just there's so many similarities. It's amazing. Wow. And one of the most awesome things I like about it is he creates humans towards the end. And when this being creates humans, he purposefully gives them mortality, because he loves them more than all of the other creations, and he wants them to return to him sooner, you know. And so like there's this whole love story mixed in there of how much he loves the human beings, and so there's just so much to it, and you're just like, if you know your Bible a lot more than just your average person or your average believer, you know that so much of that is actually like, oh, this is some Old Testament stuff. You know?
I got a question.
Yeah.
I got a question. Should I read the books first or watch the movies first?
No, you got to read the books.
Read the books. Okay.
You definitely got to read the books. The trilogy is really good, but in my opinion, The Hobbit is better. I've read The Hobbit 4 times already. And the trilogy, the books, and the trilogy I've read twice. The Hobbit is more of a fantasy adventure. It's an adventure from beginning to end. It's just an adventure. It's just Bilbo going, like the book starts. He goes on an adventure, and the trilogy is more of like, man, we got to fight for the world. Like if we don't destroy this ring, everyone's gonna die. So there's more intense drama, and there's a lot more at stake. But in The Hobbit, man, The Hobbit is a fun book because it's just this silly little hobbit who just knows nothing, naive about the world, and in the end, you know, he just becomes this master thief. It's a really cool book. I love it.
A lot of good archetypes in there, facing the dragons and all that good stuff.
Cool.
Indeed. All right, Mike, again, great conversation. And,
thank you, guys.
Stick with us, and let's let the folks listen to some music. We will. Oh, almost missed it there.
Come on, man. You
What?
gotta let Mike know the people. Mike not just this guy that we invite.
Oh,
You gotta
that's
let him
true.
know about
That's
what's
true.
going on with
That's
him.
true. I apologize.
Come on, he wants to already close the show. We gotta let him know where to get Mike, a little bit more about him, because we didn't even give him a proper introduction. That's how much we have him on the show. It's like,
That's how
nah, people,
comfortable we are.
it's how comfortable we are.
was like
Man, it's just Mike D.
I'm just one of the boys.
Yeah, it's just Mike D on the show, no problem. No, but you know, Mike D, he's an emotional intelligence coach. You know, he does Facebook posting in the morning. He has his 30-day class where you can go in and get yourself all ready in your mind and in your heart to go out there and just kill it and do it, you know, and be the hero in your own life, in your own
There you
book,
go.
right? So tell the folks, Mike, how can they get in contact with you and what you got going on?
Okay, right now there's 2 ways. If you just go on Facebook and look up Mike Davis, which there are a lot of Mike Davises. Look for the black guy that's smiling though. That's there's a group we actually have a Facebook ministry page called the Center for Christian Training and Development, and center is spelled CENTRE, CENTRE, the European spelling. So the Center for Christian Training and Development. If they go there, it'll be a lot easier to find me. We're going to be posting more on there. We're going to be doing trainings on leadership, emotional intelligence. We're getting ready to do a workshop on marriage, on emotional intelligence and marriage, because people need a lot of help in that. And one of the things that's been on my heart lately is helping leaders, especially pastors, entrepreneurs. We just had another pastor about an hour from here in Valencia, California, who took his life. Another pastor. We had one in Chino that did that. And so I was thinking about it and praying about it. So we want to do something to try to bring help, tools, strategies for people that are in positions of leadership that are struggling with certain emotions, and to help them to really deal with it and to help them to find answers. So yeah, they go to the Center for Christian Training and Development. Again, Center is spelled CENTRE, Center for Christian Training and Development. You can find me there, and from there you'll be able to find my personal Facebook page and all the other things that I'm connected to.
Awesome, yeah. And then, do you want to talk to the folks about what you're planning to do pretty soon, or no?
On our podcast?
Yeah.
We are going to be doing a podcast. I met with you guys.
Woo! Here, applause in the background. That's our sound effects.
Finally.
Yeah, we're going to be doing a podcast pretty soon that's going to be around emotional intelligence, and for the Christian community. There's one for the Christian community that we'll be doing specifically, and then one to the general community. It's all, as you guys have had me on before, you know how important I believe that is to living a fulfilling, whole, victorious Christian life. So we're going to be talking about the whole concept of emotional intelligence, neuroscience, how it relates to our Christian life, looking at the Bible, the Greek, the Hebrew, the context, all geared towards helping us to really live the way that God has called us to live in Christ. So yeah, that's going to be coming soon.
Awesome. That's great. When you told us about that, I got super excited. I was like, all right, here we go.
Called you guys and said, guys, can you come over? You guys sit down with us and showed us what we needed to do.
Oh yeah, that was a good conversation there too.
Definitely should have recorded that.
I know we should. That could have been a fireside chat or something. All right, folks. Now this time for sure. Listen to these tunes, and we'll be right back.